our guest is the pastor of First Baptist Church of Jackson, the Reverend Dallas Flippin. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you again. 2 years ago, at the start of the pandemic, you, in all churches, had to shut down, and you went to work. And you created something that was pretty awesome that I think people are still, they still remember today and even talk about the Easter story.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you like to be busy on Easter, because this year you came up with a really, I think, even more ambitious project.
Well, yeah, we for Easter we were going into kind of a series where we talked about, a lot of people get frustrated by headlines. They always feel like they're negative or pessimistic or whatever it is. But a lot of times in our own daily conversations, we also tell the same kinds of grim stories and sad stories. And so we were wanting to be mindful of what are the stories that we notice, what are the stories we share about. And so I wanted to give something that people took with them for Easter. And so we made these newspapers. And so I wrote out a bunch of stories from different vantage points. One from like a Roman vantage point.
This one? That one?
One from like a zealot, like a nationalist Jewish perspective. The Jerusalem Patriot there. One that was more from like the Sanhedrin or like the temple kind of authorities standpoint. And also one from a Christian standpoint. Well,
and these, you brought 4 of the copies, but there's even more than this.
Yeah, I've folded them in such ways that way you can kind of get access to all 4 of them and kind of have different ones highlighted as you pick them up. But yeah, it was really fun getting into it, because then you had to write stories from these different vantage points.
Well, it looks like you did a lot of research and writing, and you had to create, from 4 different perspectives, really. You made editorial decisions.
Yeah.
And as you said, the headlines tend to be negative, but you've got, with your paper, if it bleeds, it leads, right? One of the headlines, Jesus' body goes missing, which is what happened on Easter morning. And they were written like they were published on Easter morning, right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be imagining it being Easter morning, and the dates are actually different on the different newspapers. So I have the Roman one is dated based on, they started with year 1 of Rome, was their dating system. The Jewish one uses the month of Nisan for that calendar system. And anachronistically, I made the Christian one the April 33 AD, because that's what shaped their thinking of time.
And AD, they weren't calling it 833 AD at the time, though, were they?
No, they weren't yet. And later development, as they had to figure out how do we kind of scope time, and so that was just a little fun detail to add into it.
I noticed in one you talk about Judas. The headline: "Rat mysteriously found dead, suicide," and "Potential Messiah crucified at Passover," from the viewpoint of the Jews.
Yeah, and that one's from a nationalist standpoint. So I was interested of, if Jesus was crucified and you're a zealot, they wanted a revolution, and they wanted a revolution by force. And so I have some kind of angles in that story around them kind of feeling like this way of love would never actually win, and the Roman powers did not care that you loved them. They're still going to crucify you, but that they're still longing for somebody to kind of take over.
And it's not just Jesus' story. You talk about, Tiberius approves a $2 billion bailout. Is that in Roman dollars?
Yeah, so I forget the amount of the Roman currency, but the equivalent was $2 billion in our own day. And in 33, they actually did that. They were going through some financial collapse. The banks were falling apart. And they had a law that required that if you were a wealthy businessman, you had to spend at least 30% of your wealth on Italian real estate. Build back home. Don't just go to the outside parts of the empire, but you have to spend money at home. Well, as all the banks are failing and they're trying to cash out assets to pay off their debts, and the housing market's collapsing, you're trying to figure out how do I get enough money but keep enough value to fit this law. So we did this whole $2 billion stimulus plan, 0% financing for 3 years, all sorts of things that feels like our own times.
I suggest you check these out. It's a lot to take in because you've written 4 newspapers essentially, and you can get a link on your website and also your Facebook page. Last time you were here, you were just launching your new cafe where you're serving dinner one night a week, right?
Yeah.
One night a week?
Yep, Cafe Connection open from 4:30 to 7 p.m. every Wednesday. So doors open at 4:30. It's usually a pretty good wave of folks initially coming through at 4:30. The nice thing is you get the turnover where as people are going in, people are coming in, and it's been really great for us.
So you had no idea what kind of response you would have when you started this, but to me, it's got to be beyond your original expectations.
It's been wonderful on so many fronts. You know, we had close to 100 guests the last 2 weeks, and sometimes if you talk to church folks about that, they just assume this is a number about how many people go to your church and who are showing up. And it's like, no, maybe like 8 to 10 of those folks are regular church members. Just a lot of people from the community, a lot of regulars, a lot of first-time visitors. And so the guests love the experience, but also the volunteers love it. And I think we've had close to 70, 75 different volunteers who've come through to help serve on the Wednesday nights. And I was thinking about the experience when you go out to eat and you have a server that's great, you appreciate it and you notice that, like, you know, you could coast through this, but you notice when you get excellent service. But if you go in someplace and you know that they're not getting paid to give you sit-down dining experience and you're just getting treated really wonderfully no matter who you are, I think there's just the spirit of gratitude and generosity that people just love being around.
And you are a neighborhood. You've got a lot of people that live around your church. And as you said, not many people from your church are part of this attendance. So that outreach must be gratifying too.
Yeah. It might sound counterintuitive, but we decided we wanted it to feel like a business, that would actually be inviting. Sometimes people talk like businesses are cold or something like that. But if you aren't a part of our church, we know that it can feel intimidating to walk into a church building. But having its own website, having its own kind of social media and branding, having this business feel that you can feel invited, that you can walk in the doors, you know what you're getting into. And it doesn't look churchy in any way, I think, to the outside eyes. You know, you're not coming in hearing hymns. We've got some pop instrumentals or live musicians playing. You know, you got hosts and menus and servers. And
how do you pay for it?
Well, we pay through it for a few different ways. Some people decide that they want to leave us a donation because they feel so grateful for the experience that if they have something they want to provide a little bit to help. We had some people, especially early on, who wanted to just seed money to help make sure that it was afloat. And we also, as a church, decided no matter what, we want to make sure that this happens. And so we're going to seed it, and you know, whatever we don't make in donations, we'll cover it. But what we are trying to move towards is adding more sponsorships, because what we've heard from our volunteers is just people love to come out and help. So we're looking at getting into having more sponsors who can support, you know, help with the funding for the week for food, help with volunteers, all of that kind of stuff.
All right, contact Pastor Flippin if you'd like to help. Visit their website or Facebook page, and I'm sure they'd love to have you on board. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
From First Baptist Church of Jackson, one of our downtown neighbors, the Reverend Dallas Flippin. We are out of time. That's it. Thanks to everybody with us today. Tomorrow on the morning show, Dr. Austin Brown, Corey Mays, and Matt Grimes. We'll see you then.
Welcome to this week's episode of The Locker Room, brought to you by County National Bank. Coming up on today's show,